And good evening, good afternoon, I should say, 3:18 p.m. Wednesday, May 8th, 2026. This is your unkempt host, Mark Kulak at KULACZ, Houstonic.live. Support Patreon, PayPal, which can be found under the headers on HoustonITS.com or Houstonic.live. You can see up above there, just under Patreon, PayPal. All support is appreciated. P.O. Box 505, Southborough, Massachusetts. And because apparently there's either so much garbage out there or there's just so much controlled media, no one else has been able to get here yet. And it's not. I'm a pretty good analyst. I'm very good, but given the budget that I have and no staff, and I didn't even start to get looking into all of this history until several years ago, less than 10, I shouldn't be this far along. It just means no one else has been doing it. I think we now have the perspective and the context that is necessary to really start putting the pieces together regarding September 11th, 2001, what it really means, what was really happening in a way that no one's ever done before, either mostly because they were misled themselves or their job was to make sure that no one got there. And it's very hard to make any progress if you're if you don't have anything concrete to build on. My particular journey here, I mean, you could watch my whole series. A lot of it is dependent on a man named Joshua Lederberg, who is, again, without a doubt, one of the 100 most important Americans to know about of the last 100 years. And as COVID started, and as we were going through all of these documents trying to understand national security in the United States over the last 40, 50 years, and maybe even 9/11 and biological terrorism, I stumbled into this document regarding the Future Security Environment Report to the Future Security Environment Working Group submitted to the Commission on Integrated Long-Term Strategy. This is the long-term security strategy of the United States of America, and this is a working group that was formed in the 1980s. And the names on the list are mind-boggling. And many of these names are names which people who do this type of research usually say. In particular, a great one is Dov Zakheim, because I guess he owned some company that had some flight navigation and control software or autopilot, and that's proof that he and the Jews or something, 9/11, whatever. I don't even want to go down there, but many of these names have come up before in the context of the New American Century or Project the New American Century or PNAC, for people who've been trying to research 9/11. So I know that the names are consequential in that context. But if you zoom out a little bit more, you'll see that it was Andrew Marshall. Again, another one of the most important Americans to know about, but most people don't know about. And then if you go, the main members, the co-chairman, Fred Ike, Professor Albert Wohlstetter. By the way, his son created GTE, just letting you know. And then other members included Zbigniew Brzezinski, Judge William P. Clark, W. Graham Claytor Jr., General Goodpastor, Admiral Holloway, Dr. Henry Kissinger, Dr. Joshua Lederberg, General Bernard Shriver, and General John W. Vesey. And there's a lot of other interesting names here as well. I'm not going to review all of them. But it just struck me, like, what is this bacteriologist, Joshua Lederberg, doing on here? And then I read his Wikipedia page, which was interesting, but in retrospect, incredibly short relative to the impact of Joshua Lederberg, a man who was an advisor to 7, 8 U.S. presidents. And that was kind of the start of my little journey. Now, I've told many of you before about this book here. The Judith Miller Germs book, New York Times, September 9th, 2001. Of course, this is really focusing on a biological terrorism narrative, which didn't totally come to pass. But Judith Miller extensively talked to Joshua Lederberg, and he's quoted extensively in this book that came out on September 9th, 2001. And through this book, I've learned many, many things. But one of them was that Joshua Lederberg is credited here. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but I suspect that they, at the very least, were close with picking Condoleezza Rice out of the class in Stanford. That he was one of the main people who saw her as having the talents necessary to support him and other related national security objectives related to biological terrorism. And I think that's actually, although admittedly, she worked pretty hard on her own, I think there's a lot of potential truth to that, which would mean that Joshua Lederberg is a big part of Condoleezza Rice's, who became Secretary of State for many years under Bush. That Condoleezza Rice was one of several people who spoke with and collaborated with Joshua Lederberg. And I played some videos of Condoleezza Rice, and one of the main things she was involved in was working with India and being part of helping India with their safe nuclear program, which really gave India an incredible level of flexibility that most nations don't have with respect to technologies related to atomic energy, storing enriching uranium, exchanging uranium, making nuclear weapons, etc. Most nations don't have that, but India does. India got a pass, and Condoleezza Rice was part of that, which is odd. Why them? Okay. And what happens during this journey is you have a lot of shoulder shrugs. Like, well, that doesn't make total sense, but you're not always encouraged to look into it further. Now, on the topic of 9/11, because of, as if you watch my last several shows, I've really been highlighting how the United States' relationship with India is just never mentioned, in particular with conservative media. But there seems to be I use this word ecosystem, maybe it's not the right word, but of Indian influence around important political leaders and U.S. military, September 11th, 2001. And I believe that there was a role or a shared interest with some parties within India and some parties within the United States, which is necessary to understand more of the moving parts of September 11th, 2001, as opposed to having a limited worldview of Israel, Zionists, and the United States. There's way more. There's more money, there's more motive, and there's more future potential when you talk about India than Israel. And it's like, okay, now I can start to see it. Anyways, with that said, I also know that as my page shows here you can see Joshua Lederberg sitting next to Reagan. How many bacteriologists sit next to, you know what? I'm sorry, sit next to the president? Lederberg sits next to Reagan. This is 1984, 1985. That right there should get a lot of people's attention. And most people have no effing idea who Joshua Lederberg is. But Lederberg sits next to Reagan. And everyone there knows it. And most Americans right now, including people who say that they're some type of expert on researching the past, won't even say Lederberg's name. Isn't that just crazy? But I've known that Lederberg had a friendship with someone who has a bit of an unsavory reputation. And that person, as you can see here, is Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney and Joshua Lederberg were pretty close. Now, many people just assume that everything related to Dick Cheney is evil. I don't know. Why even make that judgment? Okay. I've heard it before. I don't trust Cheney at all. At all. I'm bad at telling liars, but I don't understand him though. Okay. So why should I immediately just assume he's good or bad? I don't know. But I do know what the word on the street is. And this is not going to be a long program. But Dick Cheney. And it's not just they had one letter, okay? This is the 1990 Recombinant DNA Technical Bulletin. Here you can see Nowinski and Lederberg here. We're both working on this one. I know this also involved Dick Cheney and, of course, Dick Cheney, the diplomat. But this is the Procter & Gamble, P&G, March 27th, 1994, Board of Directors. And if you look at the Board of Directors, it's Richard B. Cheney. Yes, that's Dick Cheney. And Joshua Lederberg is also on there as one of the main people. Lederberg at the time was 68. Cheney was much younger when he got involved into politics. He was only 52. At that time, he was a senior fellow of American Enterprise Institute for Public Policy. And what this suggests is that probably one of the most important mentors of Dick Cheney, aside from perhaps Henry Kissinger, is Joshua Lederberg. And it's even possible that Lederberg is a bigger mentor to Cheney than Kissinger was. This would put Dick Cheney, Jerome Hauer, Carl Sagan, Condoleezza Rice, and that's just a short list of people who are all significant partners and perhaps all operators for Joshua Lederberg. And if Dick Cheney was as powerful as people say he is, meaning he was actually the president, that means that Joshua Lederberg was really the president. Or at that level. Now, that doesn't mean all of his ideas flew, but what it means is he's that important. So, with that said, knowing that on the night of September 11th, 2001, when America's trying to understand what had happened, it is Shashi Tharoor of India, United Nations Deputy General under Kofi Annan, that's on the television. It's an Indian man. When the bioterrorism starts, it is Sanjay Gupta, who's American, but Indian ancestry. I really like Sanjay Gupta. I know he's a bullshitter. I know he lies. I know it. Please, I don't want to hear it, okay? I think he means well. I think he's one of those people who understands the situation and even tries to do the best he can with respect to understanding the bigger agenda, knowing what lies need to be told and when. I don't think he wants the world to be awful. I don't know. I don't know personally. But, there's a lot of people in this mess who are not bad people. They actually believe what they're doing. They're trying to do it in a humane way. It's awful business. Matter of fact, if you don't want to know how it's done, you don't want to know how the sausage is made. You really don't. All right? You just don't. But this is reflecting back on this, okay? So thinking that Condoleezza Rice is so important. And then I looked at all of these U.S. ambassadors, Americans involved in the U.S. ambassador roles, Richard Verma and Blackwell and the governor of Ohio. And then there was the Jackson family. And then now there's this Sergio Gore, who's really Russian. After the Charlie Kirk assassination, you just start adding these things up. And then I started looking at Condoleezza Rice videos, and I didn't realize Condoleezza Rice was so deeply committed with the United States relationship with India. And in fact, if you go to YouTube right now, okay, let's see here, just go to YouTube. I gotta make sure the volume is down over there here, okay? Let's search for Condoleezza Rice, India. Let's see, it was just video I just played. What was this one? Yeah, this is from 2022. Condoleezza Rice is still on the stage talking to key diplomats. I mean, I gotta be honest, she looks great for her age. But she, talking to key diplomats in India. This has almost become the key part of her job. It's many people know who Condoleezza Rice is, but her role, her significant role, perhaps even dominant role in India and supporting and growing the United States, in particular, the trust that the United States has for nuclear weapons and energy in India is a predominant part of her job. I never knew that. All we hear in the alternative media space anyways, or conservative media, is neocon and Israel. That's it. It doesn't extend beyond that. And every once in a while you have to hear that China's bad and Russia something. But you don't hear anything about India. I didn't know this was a significant part of her job. And then I just started thinking, okay, so if Joshua Lederberg was close with Blackwell, who went on to become an ambassador, if he was so close with Condoleezza Rice, who is again part of setting up this nuclear enrichment, securities and provisions for India, and she's still doing that today. And I'm like, Joshua Lederberg was very close with Dick Cheney. And many people who have questions about September 11th, 2001, if you ask them, who was responsible for 9/11? Most of them will say, in the conspiracy world, Dick Cheney. They go straight to Dick Cheney. Like, really, you think Dick Cheney, a 52-year-old or whatever he was at the time, actually he would have been 60. You think he was working independently? Or was someone who was effectively mentoring him, Joshua Lederberg, have been more responsible? And then I asked the question, well, if all of these people are so committed to India, which is great, I want the United States to have as many successful relationships as possible. I want the world to be focused on growth as opposed to fear and negativity, okay? God would want that as well, I believe. What do I know? What's Dick Cheney's role with India? And then I Googled it, and it's obvious. Dick Cheney saw America's relationship with India as the key part of America's growth. Period. End of story. Globalization was going to happen. The United States should not fear globalization. And the United States partner in leading globalization will be India. That was Dick Cheney. And until this time, no one has made any progress on this because the options are you either have to just believe Muslims are bad and are terrorists, they hate freedoms, that's why they blew up buildings, or Bush is bad and he works with neocons and Zionists or something like that, and they blew up the buildings themselves because they just wanted war for the benefit of Israel. Those are your two options right now in 9/11. I boiled it down. Those are your two options. There is no other option. And if you can't get out of, everyone will argue one of those two things. You have to stay in one of those two lanes. I've never used this word before, the Overton window. Well, I don't like that phrase. Overton, the hilarious window. Let's call it the hilarious window because I don't like that word Overton. It's the hilarious window. It means you have to choose one of two hilarious possibilities. Now, I'm not saying that India attacked the United States. I'm not saying that. Some people have suggested that I'm saying No, I'm not. What I'm saying is that the United States was already struggling with its own division. And there was already very deep ideological differences within the United States. And I believe one of those ideological, avenues included a very deep committed relationship with India. And mostly the relationship with India is the neoconservative movement. And it's being shown to you and me as a commitment to Israel. If you see it as really a commitment to India, it all makes sense. It makes sense. India had serious needs, more needs for resources, weapons, and geopolitical influence than they had the ability to provide. in the year 2001. Meanwhile, the United States military, which is responsible for protecting America against foreign enemies, foreign and domestic, was viewing its top domestic enemy as the pursuit of using the U.S. military as experimental test animals. And there's days of congressional legislation, which include people such as Meryl Nass, for example, going down these rabbit holes of talking about all the provisions of experimental testing, using U.S. military personnel for experimental testing, and the rights and the freedoms and the risks of old vaccines and all this other garbage. That's all they were talking about for really 2 or 3 years. Conversations which were, if you want to think of it this way, conversations which had, Joshua Lederberg and Rudy Giuliani, which has Joshua Lederberg sitting directly across the table from Bill Clinton, and Donna Shalala next to Bill Clinton, setting up the Windberg Cancer Research Center, providing budgetary resources for it, which were then spent by Robert Malone, an agent of India of sorts, and a lawyer, Richard Verma, who is with the United States Air Force, and whose wife, by the way, is an Armenian woman whose grandparents were involved in revenge assassinations in response to the Armenian genocide, sitting directly across the table from Jerome Hauer, Craig Venter, Joshua Lederberg, Barbara Hatch Rosenberg, who blamed Stephen Hatfield for the anthrax attacks. And this man here, who you think is John Podesta, is actually Thomas Monath. Thomas Monath was the boss of Robert Malone. There's several people at this table who are already acquainted with Robert Malone 3.5 years before 9/11. And then you have Flight 93 crash on a hilltop, or it definitely didn't crash. It was a missile launched by the military. And they blamed it again on Muslim extremists. Pakistanis, a matter of fact. Pakistanis. As reinforced to us, we were told it was definitely all Pakistanis that did 9/11 by people such as Shashi Tharoor, telling us what a pain in the ass all of these Pakistani Muslim extremists are. Isn't it just incredible? The last thing, by the way, there's some other great videos that you can find. If you want to understand what this Iran war is about, I'm going to make a proposal here. Let's see, Iran. That there's a possibility that Iran will break up. There's a possibility that Iran will break up into multiple nations. Do I think that will happen? I think it's possible that this could happen. And in fact, I think that it's part of the motivation for this war. You have a group within Iran which is very, which would work very well if it was aligned with India. You also have a part in Iran. Did you know something like 20 to 50% of all Armenian Christians live in Iran? There's some crazy number like that. They live in Iran. In fact, the Armenian Christian church, apostolic church, some of its most holy sites are in Iran. A breakup of Iran benefits several parties. It could benefit India. It might benefit Israel, but I don't know. Iran's so far away. It would benefit Armenians. Think of how many Armenians are part of our story. From Kerkorian to, oddly enough, the same previous ambassador to India, Richard Verma, who's married to an Armenian woman whose own grandparents were involved in revenge assassinations. I think a breakup of Iran is seen as one of the motivations, or one of the potential outcomes. I don't know why the United States is going in this direction. I don't know. I thought we have enough of our own problems in the United States, our drug epidemic. But this is one of the potential outcomes that needs to be strongly considered. And And then, of course, the nuclear issue. Now I understand why when you look at the, like, for example, the enrichment facility of uranium in Piketon, Ohio, which shut down just before 9/11. Isn't that odd? Missing uranium. It was most likely enriched uranium or spent uranium, which people thought should have been going to Ohio. In reality, has probably been going to India or some ally of India as part of whatever the handshake agreement was with India's involvement in September 11th, 2001. All of the pieces just fall together. Just search for Dick Cheney in India. And you know what's also odd is you'll notice that Dick Cheney's own daughter came out swinging for Kamala Harris. Isn't that odd? Now, again, Kamala Harris is American. She's born in America, but her mother is a geneticist from India. You know what's also strange is J.D. Vance is married to a beautiful Indian woman who was born in the United States, but her mom is also a molecular biologist from India. It's amazing how we have vice presidents so well coached in the importance of molecular biology. The same molecular biology that if you want to go back in time a little bit, okay? If you want to go back in time a little bit, you'll realize Ronald Reagan had direct coaching from the molecular biologist, Joshua Lederberg. Would Joshua Lederberg have been amenable? Would he have understood that an alliance with India was probably in the best interest of the United States and the grand experiment of advancing the Human Genome Project? He probably would have been totally understanding of that as in the best interest of humanity. Possibly. I think he totally would have been aligned with that. I don't, however, believe that Joshua Lederberg would have been okay with an engineered opioid epidemic to kill people to shape demographics. And whoever's responsibility that is, I'm not sure. So, wherever that came from, we'll figure that one out eventually. So, keep it simple. I don't think I even need to recap. You can watch that again. It's pretty obvious. You can figure it out. Last thing I'll say on this one is campaign finance. How many people right now, worldviews are based upon what they read on Twitter and what they hear on YouTube? How many? How many accounts on Twitter and YouTube are managed by farms of professionally trained social media influencers, engineers, and computer programmers in India? And who pays them? If 10 million Americans are following cats and dogs and random emojis and fake girls with large bosoms on YouTube with all kinds of interesting political insights, which are really just made by bot farms. I shouldn't say bot farms, but professionals by hand in India. Isn't that considered part of political persuasion? Which means that right now, many people in America are being influenced by money from God knows where. There is no way that this is captured. There's no way you can. I mean, I guess that at one point they talked about Elon Musk saying, well, we should at least have people be able to follow American accounts, but that can all be hacked. Anyways, the amount of money which is spent there, you don't think Steve Bannon has some role in this? Steve Bannon has been managing this stuff for years. General Flynn, whatever, his old stupid AI army, they know what's going on. Anyways, we'll expand more on that some other time. All right, guys. Thank you. Thanks for listening. I think we get it now. When we're going to continue to make progress on this. Thank you for support. Thank you. Take care. God bless.